Hey everybody. All right, well, hey, for this first video that we're going to show you, we're going to do a batch that is all about just gaining a general understanding of a batch, of a roast, how it works, what the phases are of a roast, the general time frame, the temperatures, bean probe, environmental probe, how we apply heat and use airflow to get to the end of a batch. We're going to use a bean, this Mexican bean from friends of ours, San Cristobal coffee importers, and they just have these amazing beans that they have produced with the farmers. And I love this bean because I can take it up to these higher temperatures. Like this batch that we're gonna go up to 421 degrees, and that's a higher temperature batch. But I want to do that for an intro because I want to show you guys all the phases, and we're gonna go to the end all the way into second crack, and then from there we're gonna in the subsequent videos we're gonna bring back that finish roast temperature and show different methods of ways to roast. But this first one, what I want to focus on is just get people who are unfamiliar with roasting. I want them to see it. I want them to see a coffee roaster and watch the changes happen and kind of understand what is happening. And then we can move forward and talk about some specific methods. So yeah, I hope you guys like this video. All right, so this is going to be our first roast, and the first roast that we're going to deal with today is going to be around just like it's an introductory movement into explaining roasting in general. There's like multiple aspects to roasting. Today in this batch we're going to talk about two main things, and one of them has to do with the machine itself and like looking at the ways that it functions, the controls that you have. And the other whole set of things is going to be the roasting, what is happening while beans are in a coffee roaster, the chemical reactions that are happening, but also the flow and the movement that happen. The way that I speak about coffee is talking in terms of high temperature roasts and low temperature roasts. You know, coffee and coffee roasting much more easily falls into the concept of art than it does fall into a concept of you know, this rigid, like we're following a formula to get the same result every time. It's something that it's built around taste, and taste is not objective. There's like people like this stuff and people don't like that stuff, and it's just how it works. And taste and those things change in time, and this is just one of those things where it is going to you know, what people like right now, people are going to like different stuff in 5 years, and what's cutting edge right now is going to be really old in a while, and that has to do with taste and culture and all this stuff. So when I talk about coffee roasting, I'm trying to use objective terms and not like assign a ton of value. And so high temperature, there is this objective point in the roast in which you are imparting smoke to these beans and to what will end up in the cup. And before that point, there's this whole stretch, which is low temperature coffees, coffee has become drinkable in the roaster. Like it actually got to a point where you can brew it into a cup. And the flavors on that lower temperature range are going to have no smokiness to them. So I think that coffee is easily divided into high temperature and low temperature. There is smoke present or there is no smokiness present, versus being like Italian roast, French roast, medium roast, dark roast, light roast, like all that. I mean, it's like not objective. Everybody is saying their own thing. So for me, there's just these objective markers, and you'll see them like while we're roasting in here. You'll see how there's like a point at which things turn, the beans changed, and we're in this new space, and it is a very objective marker. And so I'm gonna like walk you guys through the roasting process right now, and then also kind of like talk you through this machine. So this machine here is a Dietrich IR3 or IR7. It's 3 kilo or 7 pounds. This is from 2004. There are things that are unique to this machine, but there's also stuff that this machine has that all machines have. So it's a drum roaster, which means there is a drum that's rotating inside of here. The bearing and the post that's holding the drum is here, and it's just rotating like inside of a dryer, as you would look. There's fins inside of the drum that swish and move the beans around. When you look through this port, you can see that there are flames in there. There are burners inside of this machine, and you control that by this flame adjust tool, and then it reflects on this gauge up here, which is showing inches of water column, like how high is the flame coming out of your burners. What's unique to a Dietrich is that they use infrared burners versus like Probot or San Franciscan, or there's all sorts of manufacturers, but those other ones use like an array of burners that are not infrared, where this has 2 infrared burners under there. So there's always going to be some sort of heat source. There's going to be a way to control it, and an airflow. So how the Dietrich series does it was, we have right here this airflow, which I'm controlling. I'm selecting where the air is always evacuating through this machine, and this is selecting, do I want the air to get pulled through the cooling tray, or do I want to get pulled through the drum? Some roasters are a continuous roasting roaster, which means that there's 2 separate fans. One is pulling air through the drum, one is pulling air through the cooling tray. This is the drum, this is the cooling tray, this is the hopper up here, okay? So you're gonna put coffee in here, open it up, allow coffee to fall into the drum. You're gonna roast it, adjust flame, adjust air, look at your time and temperatures over that, and then you're gonna open up this, and you're gonna drop the coffee, is what we call that. So this here is an important panel to take some note of. So we have our time here, obviously. This is a huge factor that we take into consideration when we roast. Like, time is a component that it's a variable. It changes. We're always taking note of it. And then we have 2 readings on thermocouples. The bright red one here, the larger one, is the bean probe. So it's a thermometer, a thermocouple that's in the place inside of the drum where the beans are sitting. And then the lower number, the green number, is a thermocouple that's higher in the drum that no beans touch, and we call this the environmental temperature, and this is the bean temperature. Now, something that when I learned how to roast on one of these machines, my friend Alex told me on the first day, and it's super important to know, but I didn't get it on the first day, is that this is not the temperature of the beans. This is the temperature of the air inside the beans. So that is just something to keep in mind as we kind of get further into this. But for right now, just for simplicity's sake, think about this as the bean temp, and this is the environmental temperature. Okay. So the other thing to look at is this. This is called the trier, and this is when beans are in the roaster, they're shuffling around this trier, and you can take it out and actually look at the beans while you're roasting it to get an idea of their development, their aroma, things like that, which is it's an important factor to keep in mind. You know, I really believe in using all of your senses when you're roasting. This is something that, you know, I started out home roasting on a West Bend Poppery too, from like getting beans from Sweet Maria's, and you know, that experience of popping on a little popcorn popper is like, everything is right there, and you've got all this, you know, chaff is flying, smoke is coming out, and you like the smells and the visuals and all this stuff is like telling you so much about where those beans are at. And when you begin to go into larger machines, this is not a large machine, but you move up into 12 kilos or, you know, 25 or 75 or you know, huge roasters, you're getting further and further from that experience of just standing over a thing and seeing and experiencing what the beans are at. So my process, my method is very much to continue to be, you know, like paying attention to what does it sound like, what does it smell like, what does it look like, and kind of being connected to what's happening in this drum. And you'll see here as I talk it through, the thing that I really focus on is the environment. The environment that we're creating is the thing that we have control over. And then that environment then in turn drastically affects and changes what happens with the beans in the roaster. And that then results, as we all know, with how things taste in the cup. Okay, so maybe take a peek at this, but these are green. These are raw coffee beans. We call them green beans. It's what, like, everybody in the industry calls them. We're essentially going to cook them. We're just going to bake them over a period of time, and they're going to undergo like a metamorphosis that goes from these hard green beans to becoming this like developed, beautiful, wonderful, drinkable thing. And these are seeds that come from a cherry. And so that's something to keep in mind, is like, these are, one, they're not beans, they're seeds, but we're gonna like cook seeds essentially, so whatever. That's what we're doing. So I'm gonna get started. Now, the first thing that I do is, I think, before I start every batch, I'm thinking to myself, where do I want to end this batch? And how am I going to get there? So I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to end at 421 degrees bean temperature here. Okay, so we're going to end with this at 421, and we are gonna. That's a higher temperature roast, and as we go, I'm going to just walk through and talk through the phases of the roast and how we're doing that. And let's get started. So this batch is a 5.3 pound batch. I'm going to put it in the hopper, and I'm just going to I know it's 5.3 pounds. I know this is a higher temperature roast, so it's going to be a longer roast because it takes more time to get to a higher temperature. And I'm going to consider this, what the temperatures are going to be at when I put it into the roaster. So right now, I'm about 400 degrees for the bean temperature and 422 for the environmental temperature. This is a nice, for this weight and this machine, this is a good place for me to start. So I'm going to clear my time, and we're going to open up the hopper and let it begin. Now, what happens at the beginning of a batch, what happens is you have to consider your flame movement right away. What am I doing with heat? So this is called charging. I charged, I charged the drum, the beans are in there, it's roasting away. The first thing I did is I moved my flame up to 10 inches. So I turned the flame up all the way, and I'm gonna apply the most heat right now. I have this mass, I have this whole thing, these beans in here, and I am like, we got a long way to go. As we look at this temperature here, you're gonna see it's dropping, all right? Now, in my head right now, I'm making a calculation all the time between time, bean temp, environmental temp, and where my flame is at. And I have those things that I'm holding in my head and kind of like letting my brain think that through while I have in mind this end goal, which I have now. What happens here between minute 1 and minute 2, you're going to see our temperature is it's dropping. Well, it's going to turn around and begin to increase here. So our environmental temperature is going to turn around first, and then our bean temperature will turn around. And I am willing to say that in about 20 seconds or so, we're going to see this turn around, and then right around 2 minutes, we'll see this turn around. It might be just before that. Now, this first phase of the roast, which we are in, is called the drying phase. It's when the coffee is green, and we are like pushing these things to make this large movement and transformation. We're pushing them in temperature. Okay, so here we go. we're seeing that we've turned around our environmental temperature, and it got to 385. That's how low it got. And we're also looking at our bean temperature, and we're looking at how quickly it's rising. We're seeing it has turned around, it's increasing. I'm at 2 minutes and 12 seconds. So I'm happy with where this is at. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring the flame down some right now, and you're going to see I'm going to bring it down to about 8.5 inches. Now, why I'm picking 8.5 is because I want there to still be enough flame and enough heat that I'm pushing these beans still like pretty steadily, but that it's I don't need to have it maxed out anymore. I like where my environmental temperature got to. It didn't get too low, so I don't feel like I have to recover that by adding more heat. And so now I'm beginning to like assess. This is like the point of the roast where I like where my flame is at. I'm not going to mess with my air, and all I'm focusing on right now is our time and our temperature, and looking at how this temperature is increasing. Now, this is a term people call rate of rise. So what is the rate of rise in temperature? It's talked about over a minute. So rate of rise of your bean temperature in a minute, or your environmental temperature. In general, people are just talking about your bean temperature. It's the first phase. Now, there is an objective point at which the second phase of the roast enters. Now, there are 3 total phases. The first one is the drying phase, the second one is the browning phase, and the third one is development. Now, between the first phase and the second phase, there's a subjective thing which happens, which is the beans actually begin to change color. And this is what I love about it, is it's not like a wondering of when did it happen or what happened, or is it, it's like, no, like they changed, you know, like you guys saw them in the bucket, and here you go, they're still green, you know. Now we have a little bit of chaff being released, and this bean that I'm using, I know that typically around 250 to 265, they are changing. I'm happy that we're at this time within this temperature range. And what I'm going to do, since chaff is beginning to be released, and I don't know if you can see here, but you're going to see rolling around with the beans, there is some level of chaff being circulated with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the airflow, and I'm just going to crack it just a little bit because I want the air to begin to evacuate through there, but I'm not trying to make a drastic change in the environment of the drum. Like I said before, you know, my approach to roasting has a lot to do with like this environment. Like I am trying to take care and tend to the environment, which then will have the direct consequence of affecting what is happening within the bean. Now I'm going to pull this flame back a little bit more. Right now in the roast, I'm 5 minutes into the roast. I'm going to pull the flame back to 6.5 inches. All right, so the reason why I did that is we're like taking this turn where we're entering into the second phase here. The chaff is being released, but the heat inside of the bean is increasing enough that it's beginning to make this change in like observable color and size. Now, once this change begins to happen in the bean, it is a course which is happening throughout the rest of the roast. Okay, so this is the Maillard reaction. It is what happens with everything that you apply heat to, which then browns. So like toasting bread, caramelizing onions, roasting a marshmallow, like it's all, this is the Maillard reaction. And what's happening is these chemicals are heating up and they're joining together and they're creating more chemicals and they're joining together, and there's this whole thing that's being created, which can only be created when this heat is applied, that these flavors become available, and it is that interaction of chemicals and compounds that results in the flavors that we experience. So being the one, when you're at a roaster, who is manipulating these compounds through the way that we are controlling the environment is the work of a roaster, okay? Now, our finished environmental temperature is going to be around 445 degrees. So I know we're getting close, okay? We're within 10 degrees of where I want to be ending this. I don't want to get to be higher than 445. So what I'm going to begin to do right now is I'm going to begin to pull the flame back. So let's take a look up here. I'm going to slowly decrease the flame, nothing too drastic. I don't need to be drastic about it. Drastic moves end up doing things that you might not want to have happen. So I know that this roast, we're in for the long haul. We're going to a higher temperature. So I'm making slow movements, and I'm going to sit this thing down just under 3 inches of flame, okay? And now we are in full on, absolutely in the second phase. You can tell the bean color here in the trier has drastically changed. These beans are in the Maillard reaction. The marshmallow is browning right now. Now, like French roast or like dark roast and stuff like that is like, imagine you have a marshmallow and it's on the flame and it's browning, and then you burn it and it starts on fire and you're like, and you blow it out. Like that is what happens when you're going really higher and higher in your roast temperature, is you are just burning your marshmallow. And some people like that when they have a marshmallow. Like I don't, but some people do, and some people like really burnt coffee. But there's no like mystery. I mean, what you're doing is you're burning the beans, and that is an approach to roasting. That's not what I do. I like to get it up to that point where it's just imparting some smokiness, and that's kind of where I stop, because after that point I feel like I'm like compromising and ruining the beans. Pretty much the roasts that I'm the most excited about are the lower temperature ones without any smokiness, and that's where I feel like there's a lot to play with and a huge spectrum of flavor available to people. But you know, there is this traditional concept of coffee which has smokiness to it, and people kind of are like, it's got to be smoky and bold, or you know, whatever, however that is, you know. And so I roast my version of that traditional, you know, idea by getting right to that point where smokiness gets there, and then pull it off. Now we are getting close to having moved through the second phase. You know, our beans have continued to get darker, okay? Now, their size is changing, they're increasing, and they're taking on more heat. And so we're going to, within the next, now let's look at the temperature here. We're going to, in the 370s, we're gonna hear cracking, popping. And that is the marker of going into the third phase. There is this thing that's happening right now. The Maillard reaction is happening. You know, there's sweetness and acidity and things are going, and everything's getting heated up. And up until this point, there is moisture inside of those green beans, which the moisture is the means by which the heat is transferring from the outside of a bean to the inside of the bean. And what's about to happen is that those water molecules are about to split, and we're going to hear them split, and they're going to start popping and cracking, and then all the water is out of these beans, and what we're left with is the cellular body of the bean itself. There's no more water to transfer heat. This also means that these beans could be drank at this point. It is like a brewable beverage. So here we are, 10:30 in our time, so it's been 5 minutes in our second phase, okay, which I'm going to just lock that into my brain. I'm thinking in my head, okay, we've been here for 5 minutes or so. That's gonna have a consequence to how long we do things at a later point. What I'm going to do is, you can hear the cracking. The beans are exothermic. They're pushing out heat, pushing out smoke. And if you're lucky, you get to see the beans in the trier cracking open, because they're expanding. They have this huge thing that's happening in their world right now, and we are going to guide them through it. And so here we go. I'm going to take a look at our environmental temperature, our bean temperature, and our time, and we're going to begin to move this roast further up into these higher temperatures. So this is a low temperature roast right here, 385. This would be a light roast, really bright flavors, really light body. We're going to keep going. We're going to go all the way up until there's a second crack. And now second crack still happens within the third phase, the development phase, but it is an objective point at which you know smokiness is being imparted in these beans, and that's where we're trying to get to. So that's going to end around 421 is where I'm trying to get this to. So I'm going to increase my airflow right now. We've been in first crack, and I'm just going to slowly open this up. The only way to transfer heat at this point in the bean to develop it further and the flavors that I'm going for is by airflow. Before, when there was water, we could use conduction, which is transferring heat by touch and by those water molecules, transferring the heat. Now the water's gone. The only way to do it is by using air. So convection. So I'm opening up the airflow. I'm getting the smoke out, and anything that's happening here, the chaff, we're moving through. It also is going to increase when you open up airflow. Let's say you're like pushing a roast slowly, and you open up your airflow. You're gonna see that your environmental temperature is going to increase. So but there's a point at which you open it up enough, and it begins to cool off your roaster. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open it up. I'm just finding the good spot where I'm going to see it. Now check this out. So it's started to go down. So I found that spot at which the flame is not strong enough. The airflow is overpowering the flame. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch the flame up just a bit. Look at that flame gauge. We're going to go to just under 4 right there. And we're going to see, I got 5 degrees to play with here, and I'd like to use all those degrees to increase the roast. So I'm okay. This is relatively a stable environment for these beans. Now I'm looking at this. I got about 15, 17 degrees to work with here. So now I'm focusing on, this is the last part of our roast, and I'm looking at the development of these beans. I'm thinking about the airflow. I really, at the end of a roast is when I really I smell them to figure out where they're at. These are just about, they're like at the latter part of what would be a low temperature roast. And we're just about to go into the second crack, which is the cellular body of the beans breaking down. Like when you have a fire and you're hearing wood pop and crack, it's the same idea. These beans had enough heat where now they're beginning to break down. But for a lot of people, those are desirable flavors, and like I've been saying, we aren't going to go hard or far deep into that space. We're just going to touch it to impart it. We have a lot of sweetness, and there's still, because we've been really gentle with this roast, there's still going to be some nice acidity. Nothing big, but just this balance. Okay, so I can hear it's more of a faint crack that's happening in here. And we're just about to drop this. Okay. So, here we go. You can hear them. These little snaps. They're just entering those snaps. I'm going to clear the chamber and help them cool off a little bit. Now, as you can see, these have taken on a nice, even color, really good tone. They look super chocolatey, which is what we want. We want sweetness and chocolate or caramel or, whatever. We're looking for sweetness, touch of smokiness, and a touch of acidity still left in a roast like this one, where they're a higher temperature bean. But even how they feel, when you're moving them around in the cooling tray, you can tell, they haven't lost a ton of mass. We have lost all the moisture, which is going to happen in every single batch that you roast, but the body itself of these beans is still has its weight and its mass to it, and they are happy little beans. So it took us 14 minutes, 57 seconds. We got to 421 degrees, which was what I was hoping for. I on this roaster with this amount of beans, 15 minutes getting up to that 420 range is like perfect, exactly what we want. So I hope that you guys saw how we have these phases that we're moving through when you're roasting coffee, and that you are controlling this environment, as the beans are undergoing this transformation. You're guiding it through. And now every batch is going to look a little bit different. But really, this is the same concept of every batch of coffee that's roasted. So you're bringing it, you're applying heat, you're bringing it into the Maillard reaction, which is that second phase, and then it hits the first crack, which we've lost our water. It is now a soluble drink. It's not a drink, I guess they're beans, but they become soluble. We can make a drink out of them, and that is then the development. And that is really the part where all the pieces of the roast moving up to that point, they're coming together, and you're really defining the flavors for what's going to happen in the cup. And we walk through all of those temperatures to get to that high temp. And I think what we'll do here will be these next videos. We're going to look at the methods and approaches of roasting different batches at different temperatures. So.